Well, hello there, Don. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, that was very kind of you to invite me. I'm really looking forward to this.
So, everyone, I'm going to have him introduce himself in a moment, but as we are talking about a lot of the things that are going on right now, especially in pre-sales or as we call it, buyer enablement in the technology sector, I wanted to have someone in that I consider to be unparalleled expert in this space that
Oh,
not only trains people similarly to that we do on storytelling. He does an amazing job of training people in pre-sales and buyer enablement across all kinds of different industries. And so it's Don Carmichael. He's from Winning Skills Limited. He has a lot of content already out there. So a lot of you might already be aware of him. If you are on LinkedIn at all, you're seeing a lot of the cool hot takes he has and some of the things that he has to say, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But before I get too excited, like a hyperactive child, I'm going to go ahead and let Don introduce himself a little bit, and then we'll jump in.
thank you so much, Aaron. I was going to say I'm actually gone slightly red. I'm embarrassed with it, but of course, as a professional, I'm going to blame the lighting, which is very very much your world, the video kind of world. Yeah, yeah. The lighting's making me blush. It's nothing to do with the fact that
Nothing
I'm
else.
actually
Nothing else.
blushing. Thank you so much. Yes. So, yeah, Don Carmichael. Our company, Winning Skills, actually kind of partially rebranded it. I, recently because I kind of realized that actually no one has any idea what the name of my company is because we don't really do much to promote it. But the efforts I do put into kind of social and video and things like that, and webinars, podcasts, that kind of thing are under my own name. So I did something that's very. You probably tell from the accent, I'm kind of British. I'm actually Scottish, but that's a technicality. So British people, I did something that's very un-British, which is kind of rebranded under my name. So it's now doncarmichael.com. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the potted history is 35 plus years in this thing called pre-sales or technical selling. Tried to at one point, I think I was attempting to kind of tick off all the big tech names. But I was 11 years at SAP, and I finished off there as head of pre-sales development for EMEA, and a similar-ish role at Oracle. And then by 2015, I kind of realized that I'd all this experience in pre-sales in a lot smaller companies as well. That the bit that I liked about it was actually helping other people. Um,
Mm.
Coaching people, facilitating people. I think, Aaron, you're very similar. So in 2015, started a company, Winning Skills, and basically found a way to kind of build content and project ourselves and help people. And then we met ourselves a couple of times on that journey. With
Absolutely.
both
That's
one
right.
time facilitating the kind of demo to win in the demo to win world, and kind of deep demo architecture and skills, that kind of thing. So, but have diversified from that into things like sketching. I'm kind of really interested in the mechanics of how pre-sales is actually done, especially things like how discovery is done. What is it that you're actually trying to do? And the deep mechanics and architecture of how a demo works, and how that would translate into the new world of not just doing it live or even virtual, but how that
Hmm.
translates into doing it via video or any other form that we'll have in the future. And I love my tech toys, so I do have VR headsets. And I was just shown there before Aaron. I was trying to. My tax accountant tells me at certain points that I have to do some capital investment. So I'm showing Aaron it's a was it GoPro Creator Edition with a Rode microphone on top of it. So I'm absolutely looking forward to playing all this kind of new
And
technology.
Don, that's one of the things I love about you too, is that I constantly see you trying new things and not being afraid to kind of innovate that way. The way that I've seen you in the last, and you were one of the first people I feel like in our industry, in that kind of sales, pre-sales, buyer enablement world, that were started using LinkedIn as more of a social channel to give your unvarnished sometimes opinion on things, and to start. The way that you do it is so wonderful though, because you start conversations. It's not just this
Mm.
is what I think and that's the way it is. It's much more this is what I'm seeing, what are other people seeing, and I've just been amazed at the way the comments and the conversations that have been spurred off of there. um, and it's really great example of how people in buyer enablement, people in technology sales, but also just in technology, or that are just using LinkedIn right now,
Mm.
especially very topical if you are looking for a new job or looking
Mhm.
to make sure that you're building your individual brand so that your brand is of value to whichever larger brand you might be attached to right now.
Yeah.
I've seen you really lead the way in doing that and growing a following doing that as well. And then you started the podcast as well. Two pre-sales in a pod, right? That's the name of the
That's it. That's
podcast.
exactly it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't invent the name. It was actually we co-founded it with a guy called Adam Freeman, who's
Mhm.
done quite well at that. So I think he's had 2 promotions since since we
Yeah. I
started
mean,
that.
and that's
Yeah,
such a great point, right? You can start podcasts, you can start doing video, you can buy some fun toys. Hopefully your accountant isn't too mad at you, but you can start making some content and just putting it
exactly.
up and just getting
Yeah,
over the fear of like, well, what if it isn't perfect at first? Blah blah blah. Like, just do it. Just start
exactly.
advocating for your buyers, giving them information, and all of a sudden your smaller brand, and we were talking about this a little bit before too, I'd love to hear more of your opinion on it, but how have you seen for yourself, let's just say for your own business, how has that affected you kind of going out there, getting on LinkedIn, starting making video, doing the podcast? How has that affected your business?
Mm. Uh, so I have to kind of like start another point to get to that conversation,
Sure.
which is a huge admission, which is I absolutely suck at selling.
This is from a guy.
Obviously, in
Yeah, the
right,
definition of selling, I think we'd have to disagree on there, because if it's just being front of mind for people that might be buying something in the future or need a trusted advisor to point them to what they should buy, I feel like you are a good salesman.
okay, yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that one. I suppose, yeah, I'm being somewhat flippant. I think it's the things like doing cold calling and that kind of closing thing.
Mm,
I don't know whether I'm being too British about it. I really dislike doing that. So tools like LinkedIn and trying to get and using video and using social, it was kind of like, well, if I feel uncomfortable doing that, is there another way I can kind of get my name, you know,
mm,
look to influence and advocacy partner with people? Is there a way I can get myself out there where I feel slightly more comfortable about it, where I'm not selling? I'm selling in the sense that that kind of aggressive consumer facing thing, kind of let's buy a Cadillac kind of thing. I just feel really uncomfortable doing that. So
yeah.
so what's worked for me, and you've got to experiment a little bit with this, but I think what we would both tell people is, social, using video, images, is it, have an idea and then just go with it. Um, that's much better. That will ultimately have a much better effect on, if you're building a profile, you're trying to influence, or in our case, we're kind of building a business, which is all
Mhm.
about, influencing people a lot earlier on, perhaps even before they're making a decision about, having any kind of coaching or going on a workshop. And it does work. It can take maybe 6 months, a year later, but you can actually, what a marketing people call it, attribution effect. You can see that
Yes.
they said, "Oh yeah, I remember that you talked about this topic on this podcast or this webinar," and you go, "Wow, that was such a long time ago. I can hardly remember what I said, but it influenced them." And they remember,
I hope it
and
was
some
smart.
time later they come back, yeah. And so there you go. So if you dislike, so I've never had to do any cold calling ever. In fact, I even suck at chasing people up after they've asked for some kind of details about workshops and things. I'm kind of like, well, if I've given you everything that you want, I feel uncomfortable hassling you. So
Don, I would
yeah, so it's
say,
worked wonderfully for me.
yeah, yeah, I would say that that is a brilliant way to go about it, and that buyers, today's buyers, like that much better than kind of the things that you alluded to. We all have that stereotype in our head of the salesperson that like is kind of like that Cadillac salesman, or someone that's constantly trying to just close you as soon as they start talking to you, not really listening to what your needs are, not really building that trust and that advocacy, so that they feel like the buyer feels like you're on their side and that you truly are on their side. And
Yes.
yeah, in the short term, you might not do a webinar or a individual podcast episode or a, even this that we're doing right now and be able to track in the next 2 weeks a huge spike in people that sign up or something. But the fact is that you are planting seeds all along that can grow, that start conversations, and that when people are ready, there's a history there. There's a wealth of information. There's webinars, there's podcasts, there's LinkedIn articles, there's LinkedIn posts, things that they can go like with a couple of clicks, go like, oh, Don knows what he's talking about. If I start a conversation with him on this, he'll probably either he's the right fit or he'll be able to point me in the right direction to the right fit for me to solve my business problem, which is no small thing. It's huge.
I was going to say, we're doing, what was interesting is we're doing something that seemed to feel right and seemed to work before there was even any research into why it was working or what was actually going on. And I just love the whole thing about buyer enablement, because it's like, it almost explains what was actually happening. This whole idea that buyers, what is it, 2/3 of their journey, it's all self-research. They're looking for content, and it's like, wow. So that, so what we're doing works really well in that, because they can find us on LinkedIn. You don't even have to follow us. If you don't want to connect with me, that's fine. If you want to follow, it's a one-way relationship. I don't get to see what you do, but you can see what I do. And if you find that interesting, that's great. And at some point, if that influences you towards wanting to work more, with both of us, then that's fantastic. And also it kind of feeds into this, consumer behaviors coming into the buying, into the business world, which is this whole thing about people do not want to be sold to. They want, quite happy to do all the research themselves, and it's like the last thing they want to do is put their hand up and the top right of all these tech companies' websites where it says kind of book a demo, and you put your email address in there, and we all know what's going to happen next is you're not going to get a demo. And we all know that. There's no illusions behind that.
Don,
you're not going to get a
you're
demo.
blowing it for everyone.
What happens is a business developer is kind of going, whoa, that's a buying signal. I need to get in contact with you immediately and start qualifying you, asking all these difficult questions like, are you going to buy in the next 6 months? Have you got budget? Are you the right authority? Have you got a real need that matches with ours? And you just go, none of that. Most people are going, none of that. I'm just interested. I want to learn. So the more you find out about this world, the more it fits really well into this kind of things like putting content out there on LinkedIn and video. It just everything's kind of come together to fit with, this works, and we can prove it
I feel like in the past there was maybe a bit of that's something like a passion project. You should be not doing that on company time. I feel like even the large brands now, SAP, Microsoft, IBM, like Salesforce, everyone, they're starting to see the value in having their employees, if they're full-time employees, spend time doing the things that you are talking about right now. Like making a fun video that's a hot take on something in the industry and publishing it, and not to the company blog or to the company page, to their individual brand that is associated with the larger brand, and that everybody can win here. Don or Aaron, if they are working for a corporation as full-time employees, can build their own brand, which makes their career hopefully grow at a sustainable and faster pace and gives them more opportunities. And also, while they are coexisting with the current brand they're working for, it helps that brand. It validates that brand. Yeah. And I think that companies that don't see this right now are so stupid. Like, you need to encourage your people to do this. Hire people that want to create content, that want to start a podcast, that want to make videos. And buyers are smart. They'll see who you work for on LinkedIn. They'll see who else Don works with when he's making his podcast. And those people become credible as well. When he guests on other podcasts, it's an ecosystem. It's not just like you said, book a demo on the website, because buyers are smart and they know that they're not actually going to get to talk to Don.
Although, I mean, we're jumping ahead slightly, but it sounds like a really good fit to talk about something we were planned to talk about anyway, because you were talking about you need to build your own brand, and that could be a sub-brand of your employer. But if we look at, what's happened in the employment market right now. So we're recording this in January 23,
Yep.
and the news is a wash of tech companies. We're
Mm.
what do you call it? Reduction in force. They've got kind of redundancies,
That's a nice
layoffs
way
of,
of saying it.
and
Reduction in
it,
force.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
firing a bunch of people.
Can I tell you a funny little story, 30-second story? I forget the name of the company. It's a smaller company, but they had this brilliant term. If someone left the company, if you were asked to kind of leave the company, it was referred to as you graduated from them. And I just love all, I love all the overtones with that, which is, it wasn't reducing force. We helped you out because
We helped
you
graduate
graduated.
you. Fantastic.
Indeed, yeah. I
Uh-huh.
just love it. I mean, there's a positive spin to that. But going back to what you're saying there, I think that's super important. Is you building your brand. It's about you and how you're seen, not just in your role and with your manager, but outside the business, in the ecosystem, in the peers. We call it pre-sales, a technical selling role, but we know that there are probably hundreds of different job titles that encompass
Yeah.
this kind of technical sales role. So don't focus on the fact it's called pre-sales. We're just using that as an umbrella term.
Yeah.
But
For anyone
they
that's
promote
that's
you into that.
listening, yeah, for anyone that's listening to Don and I right now, and you're like, what the hell are they talking about? What we're
Yeah,
talking about right now is something that exists largely in technology, but also in other verticals as well. But there's the account executive, which is what a lot of them are called. It's the sales rep. Okay. And that's the person that's actually going to do the deal for you, get you to sign contracts, things like that, talk to you about your budget, things like that. And then there's this separate role. We call it buyer enablement or pre-sales a lot of times. They're called sales engineers. There's a lot of different terms depending on the specific technology industry you're in, but they are more the people that know the product really well and that are good at asking questions and showing you specifically what it can do to solve the business pain that you're presenting. So they know the product or the service very well. They're, like Don talked about before, they're usually the people that you're trying to talk to, and it can sometimes be hard to find. So I just want to level set there because I didn't do a good job at that at the beginning of this podcast, but that's what we're talking about right now. Yeah.
yep. That's I'll bring up my really old copy of Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath, which is
Yes.
absolutely brilliant. Because if we ever get on to talk about storytelling, it's brilliant in there. But they've got a thing in there which is the curse of knowledge, and that was a really good example of it. So the curse of knowledge is you can't remember what it's like not to know what you know now. And I
Oh,
did that.
so
I
good.
just went straight in and went, oh, pre-sales, no, without imagining that the audience might not know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's called the curse of knowledge. And I think anybody in any profession with any level of kind of experience that you've built, that's something that you have to constantly be aware of. Is, does this person actually know what I'm talking about?
That's the
It,
thing
I,
too, and we all do it in our different industries. We have our own acronyms, we have our own things, and we get so comfortable in it that sometimes we forget to be inclusive of. I mean, and this is kind of drilling down into what we actually both of us consult on and teach people to do. Me through storytelling and on camera work, you through getting in and consulting and actually helping them like with a technical discovery and things like that. But when you're talking to people and you're working in buyer enablement or pre-sales, a large part of the job is to make it so that a sixth grader could understand it. That you can take these very technical concepts and be able to explain it to a CEO or a CMO that might not know anything about how the technology that you're explaining works. You can still tell that story in a way. You can ask them the right questions so that you can show them the right things and
yeah.
help them understand it in a way that doesn't make them feel defensive or make them feel stupid,
Yeah,
which is an art.
that's brilliant. It is hard, and just to make it sound like it's even harder, is one of the things we've kind of learned from buyer enablement is that that there's a whole series of stakeholders. I mean, I think what's the average at the moment? Something like there are 11 decision makers
Oh,
at
wow.
least that are part of any kind of any technology buying journey. But the
Mhm.
thing is, there's probably a lot more than that because when you start looking into how people buy things, is in tech companies, that half of the people are probably hidden from you,
Mm.
because decisions are made. A lot of people are worried about risk and kind of outcomes rather than what does it cost, or what is the technology, and they look to gain consensus across a lot more people than you would imagine. So when you're creating a story, or even these days, better to create something like a video. When you're architecting something like that, you really need to hold it in your head that I think I'm talking to this person with this experience who would understand this. But actually, once you've created that message, once you've created that as a video, you've no longer got control of that. Okay.
Yeah.
So they could pass it on to their boss, who passes it on to somebody in a completely different department. And back to this curse of knowledge problem is, if you haven't articulated it in a way that, let's say, non-technical people or non-operational people who wouldn't know, how a process particular works. If you haven't found a way of creating a message that can navigate above that and still talk about, a value proposition and how it fits into the strategy of, the buyer's company. If you haven't done that, you're kind of wasting an opportunity there. So a lot, this really is about um, communicating difficult and complex subjects, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
that's the ability at a lot of it. It's not just understanding how the technology works, but finding different ways of articulating how does that turn into, value and outcomes, and
Yeah. It's like that.
using all the new media to do that.
Yeah, especially when you're working with asynchronous video. We helped Microsoft recently do a project kind of like this, where we were helping them understand the different kinds of small videos that to help salespeople and buyer enablement folks make for specific people that are requesting information. And then, you can build a library of certain topics that are kind of universal and you can use multiple times. And then there are certain videos that you make specifically to answer that specific question for that client at a specific time, which we call darts. It's a specific video for a
Ooh, I
specific
like
time.
it.
You throw a dart once, you don't expect to use it
Yeah,
again. But if you use these during the buyer process or the customer education process, they can be really effective. But to your point, specifically, only if you learn to tell stories that are
yes,
accessible enough that they can pass them along to other people without
yeah,
further explanation.
yeah,
So it has to be, it's one thing to send it to someone that understands, like an operational person that understands the process and how something should work and how it's working currently in their business and the pain they're trying to overcome. But if they're passing that along to the person that writes the check,
mhm,
and that person doesn't have any of that operational knowledge, the story has to be able to be able to carry up to that level. And so
yeah,
learning how to do that in a way that is not, and it is an art, because it needs to not be
yeah,
patronizing, but at the
yep,
same time, it needs to not be so overly complex that it makes you look smart, but they don't get it and they stop watching 30 seconds in,
yep.
which is,
It's
it's,
an art,
yeah,
isn't it? It's a real art.
yeah.
Yeah,
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 absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about kind of the elephant in the room with, you already touched on it, but this reduction in force, or mass graduating.
yes.
A huge graduation class at Google and at
A huge
Microsoft in the last couple
graduation.
of
Yeah,
weeks.
yeah, yeah.
And other companies more than likely going to be following suit. As we all know, when
Mm,
the big ones do it, it's like they give permission to the mid-sized companies to start doing the same thing. It's like a signal
absolutely.
that
Yeah,
starts to wave. So I'm expecting more of those to happen. Um,
yeah.
let's talk about this in a couple of different ways. First of all, for our sellers and our people in buyer enablement that did not get cut,
Mm,
is this possibly a time for them to start doing some of the stuff like I was mentioning that I've seen you doing as well? Like, how hard was that for you to get started, really? Could you talk about that a little bit? Let's say I'm a pre-sales person. I'm like, okay, a bunch of my people just got let go. I don't know if
yeah.
there's going to be another wave. What's a way for me to be able to start being visible in a positive way? What are some tips that you would give them? Like, how should they start? Should they do?
Mm. So there's some friends have a company, and they call what they do is employee advocacy, which is, I know we've kind of used this word, and it's really, what they're trying to find is a journey how you would do this, and it maybe starts with, let's say you're uncomfortable, that what you're doing is your marketing team are actually, and this happens a lot. There's lots of different tools that do this in a company. They say, look, here's 10 articles that we've kind of approved, that we're okay with it. You can share, and
Mm,
and you see a lot of people doing this. In fact, I've got some colleagues who I know, and I could tell you if I didn't know what day of the week it is, I would know what it was a Friday, because they always click. They
They
click
always
three
have an
articles.
article posted on that day at
And you
8
go,
a.m.
well, oh look, it must
Yeah.
be Friday, because they kind of
Mhm.
they looked at it and go, oh yeah, I have to. There's a thing in LinkedIn called your was it social selling index (SSI). In some companies, it's a little, yeah. There's some people kind of would argue against this as using it as a measure, but there's still a lot of people do, and they might go on a Friday, oh, I need to do something towards my social selling index is slipping, so I'll just click reshare 3 articles without putting any effort in whatsoever, or not doing the one thing you should do, which is at least say, for my audience, my network, this is why I think this is important. I mean, that's the absolute basic minimum. Don't share anything
That's
unless you put a
baseline.
skill in it. That's
Find
baseline.
an article that maybe your company works for. If you do work for one of these larger companies, they probably have provided the marketing department's like, hey, share this stuff.
Mm,
If you do, that's easy mode. So that could at least get your feet wet. But don't
yeah.
do that. Please listen to Don. Do not
Yes.
do that without critically thinking about what your opinion is on it.
Yeah.
Like, put your own take as the post and then post the article. Like,
That's it.
put yourself
Exactly.
in it. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it just looks like a pump and dump thing, and people roll their eyes and scroll past it. I'm not kidding.
Yep, absolutely. Well, there's a great way of kind of explaining this. What they call it, the 3 C's of content, which is there are people who consume the content, there are people who curate the content, which is effectively what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like in a museum, I'm taking an asset that already exists and curating it in a different way. But what you want to do is you want to get onto the creator side of things. And there's a real low percentage of people on LinkedIn who are actually creating content. It's we talked about this before we hit record there. It's kind of like the Wild West. Really are so few people, way less than 5%, I believe, of people who actually create content. And
Specifically on
so
LinkedIn, right? On that platform.
particular on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, yeah.
Mhm.
So this is really open for you to kind of create a voice and have an opinion on something. And I think anyone who's in a kind of technical selling role, you have an opinion, of course you do, because
Yeah.
you're probably working with buyers every day. And there's one thing, you uniquely get to speak to probably, let's say, 3 or 4 different companies a week. Like maybe less or more, whatever,
Mhm.
but you get to learn a whole load of things that the buyers you're speaking to, that it's almost impossible for them to do that, especially if, let's say, you're speaking to some of their competitors, or a an aligned industry to them. So you have got something really important to say. And I'd start with, don't make it big, make it like a quote. This is what I think's happening at the moment. This is what I would say about it. What do you think? That's easily enough, just that bit
Open
of
it up as a
text.
conversation. Don is
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic at this, by the way. If you need inspiration, check out some of his posts, because he does that. He starts conversations. He gives you his opinion. He supports it, but then he asks for conversation around it. And here's the key as well. He gets involved in the comments and
Yes,
thanks people for their
absolutely.
viewpoints, and then also continues the conversation there. Like, he's very
Yeah,
active in
absolutely.
doing it. He doesn't just plaster something and run away. And something that Don said as well, which I feel like so many more people are able to do now if they just take the opportunity to do it. It's scary the first couple times, but it's not that bad. We all have a camera, whether it's built into your computer or you've got a better setup like Don and I do, or you go out and hopefully your accountant's not too mad and you buy a GoPro camera, or just use your phone. We all have smartphones now, most of us, that you can make a quick video with. And posting it to LinkedIn has never been easier. So take that article or that insight that you read or that thing that was provided by your marketing department and they told you needed to repost, and
Yeah.
read it, and then do a video. Hey, my marketing, or this is something that we're thinking about in our industry. Here's my opinion on it. What do you think? And post that video, and then
Yeah.
maybe post the article as well. But it can be that easy to start. And here's the
Yeah.
other thing that I would say. Some people don't want to give themselves permission to start doing this because they feel like, well, I'm still, early on in my career. I'm only a year in buyer enablement or something like that. Guess what? Your buyer only needs you to know 1 or 2 more things than them in order for you to be of value to them. You do not have to be at Don's Mr. Miyagi level of knowledge in order to start doing this. You just
Absolutely.
need to know a little bit more than your customer to be helpful to
Yeah.
them. And this is to Don's point, if you are in a couple of conversations a week talking to other buyers and hearing what's going on, you have more expertise than you're giving yourself credit for.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And an interesting little exercise that I would encourage anyone to do is, and I probably got this tip from you, Aaron. So if I did, thank you so much. It's to do a little. I did a little video, which is it's called "Why We Should Be Talking," brackets in 23 seconds. I think I did that a few years ago, and it was really it was a thought exercise. It started with, what is it? What is it I think that I'm passionate about, and
Mm.
what would I expect the people I'm talking to then be interested in? And could I just, in like 20 seconds or so, actually just say that, this is what I'm passionate about. I think you're probably interested in this. And if you are, let's talk. It doesn't need to
Let's talk.
be anymore. Let's talk. Let's just have a chat. Or connect on LinkedIn, something a little bit more of a call to action. And I know, was it last year, I wanted to redo it using buyer enablement, because it's a fairly, modern term, and just explain, how my thoughts and passion revolve around that as well. So I redid it and managed to shave 2 seconds off it, which I, which you
Nice.
think you'd kind of go, what? And I was like, no, I was running around,
That's a
like
big
I'd
deal.
scored a goal or something. That's a big deal. So I kind of reposted it and said, look at this, I've got it down to 21 seconds. So it is literally called "Why We Should Be Talking in 21 Seconds." And my rationale is, I can't believe there's not anyone out there who would spend 21 seconds, not want to spend 21 seconds to find out what I'm passionate about, because that's not a lot to ask of
I
anyone, is it?
love
And
this
it
idea.
is literally
Yeah.
21 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's one of the things that we helped several firms with, was with their sales and pre-sales people, buy enablement people, is helping them make what we call signature videos, which are,
Yes.
like, you, to Don's point, like 25, 30 seconds or less. It's basically like, hey, this is what I do. This is what I'm passionate about. This is how I might be able to help you. Let's have our conversation. Don's done a great job of using that, not just at the bottom of his emails, but like there's a place on his website where you can see it. Like, it's just a
Yeah.
great way for you to you could even post it as a video to your LinkedIn profile. Like,
Which you
because you
did.
can
Yeah.
add a video instead of a picture now. You can have your picture and it's also clickable with a video. And so that's what I do. It's just a clip from my signature video that says, this is what I do. It's amazing how engaging that is.
Yeah. And
So
if you've
you
done
can
the
start
thought
having fun
exercise,
and doing these little things.
yeah. I mean, if you've done the thought exercise to do that and say, this is what I'm passionate about and I'm interested about, you've actually done most of the work to
Mhm.
work out what you should be posting on, because you've said it. You must have said it in that. This is what I'm passionate about. And you go, actually, I am. I have things that I'd like to say, or conversations I'd like to start, because you don't have to be. And the other thing, don't be scared about whether you're right or wrong. You're just starting a
Yeah.
conversation. So that's a lot less scary. That is, you say, "Well, I think this. What does everyone else think?" That's a brilliant way to start it. We have a great example. I just posted it. Was it last week about? We've talked about what pre-sales is, the technical selling
Mm.
function in technical companies. I asked a question. Awkward conversation number one. Is our profession ageist?
Oh, I
And I,
love that one. I loved
and,
that one. See, this is the thing I love about Don too, is he brings up things that, like, the elephant in the room, and in a way that people feel constructive and can talk about it. Let's talk about that a
yeah.
little bit in our profession. Yeah.
Yeah, and that got some amazing things, comments on there with things I hadn't really thought about. I'd maybe observed, and it made me think, as in, maybe people do that profession, and it's almost been built to kind of, you build a skill set that is useful in other places in the technology
Mhm.
business. And what people do, the reason you don't see many older people my age or grey hair doing the role is maybe because they've kind of evolved, they've graduated, within the company, off to do
Uh-huh.
things like, product
Into
management, or
management.
yeah,
Yeah.
that management, or you see a lot more people who there are like field CTO roles and kind of technology
Oh, that
evangelist
makes
roles.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah, where you don't have to go into management. If you've mastered what we've been talking about, kind of social and video, and you can basically beam yourself out, like, this is what I think, and you become a rainmaker. you're pulling people in who are interested in kind of you. And you said a great thing before as well, Aaron, is that you become almost like a sub brand of your company. You make yourself absolutely bomb proof if you're the one in the videos
Mm,
who's doing the thought leadership stuff.
that's so
Buyers
good, Don.
naturally want to meet you. Don't they? Kind of go, great, I'm going to meet Aaron.
Yeah, and
Aaron,
that's
I've
the
seen your
last person.
videos. I want to meet him.
If I'm a manager and I'm in leadership, the last person, if someone's done a great job of that, like Don, the last person that I'm getting rid of is that smaller, well-known brand that already has a trusted advocacy, a group of people, and it is already out there. I want them related to my brand.
Yeah.
So if I am looking at cuts and I'm looking at 50 pre-sales roles or buyer enablement roles or something, like I'm already putting Don in the like getting rid of last column,
Thank you.
because the fact that no, but because of the fact
Yeah.
that your brand that you have built up is too valuable to lose right now,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
right now every deal counts for me. Okay. So if I'm going to be making cuts, I just wonder if that is a great way to combat. We're kind of coming full circle. That's a great way to combat ageism, is
Yep.
for the people that have the wealth of experience, that are past the basically past the 40-year mark. If you are past 40 years old and you start to
Mm,
see that like they're backfilling roles with 22, 23-year-olds, that's great. We always need new people coming in. But if your people are effective, or you're building a brand, a
mm.
sub brand, if that's what I'm doing, I would do. If I was in that role, I would be like,
Absolutely.
okay, I need to start doing what Don's doing. I need to start like a podcast. I need to do all this stuff. I need to be more visible in a positive way, so that they don't, if I want to stay here, I'll be one of the last. It's kind of making yourself bomb proof, just like you said.
Mm. It is interesting as well, because you speak to a lot of people who say, "Oh, well, the only way I can progress in my career is into management." And I always say, "Well, oh, that's such a shame if that's the only
Yeah.
route." A technology company, you are seeing a lot more technology companies building this parallel route. Actually, it's very interesting because that's a very German thing to do. Is that in a lot of
Oh,
German companies, engineering companies, it's always been there that you could have parallel career routes. You could be the Meister, the absolute expert in something, and have a career route all the way to CEO, as well as a parallel management route. The issue you've got to watch out for in a management route is you become a generalist very, very quickly.
ah,
It's a generalist role that will expand if a manager in the technology world. What's the definition of management is to optimize the resources under your control. So you could be a manager in another industry, but if you're like me, super passionate about what you're doing, I could never. I mean, that's why I didn't want to do management anymore. I kind of got to almost like a VP level, and it was like, this isn't for me. Playing politics and the bureaucracy of kind of managing and dealing with people. People are very hard. If
because
you can deal more with
it's a different
ideas,
skill set,
ideas are
right?
really much
Just
easier. Yeah.
because, yeah, to your point, it's a different skill set. Just because you are amazing at buyer enablement, at helping customers make good decisions for their business and helping them think through their problems and come up with a solution they feel great about, that might be extremely fulfilling for you. There shouldn't only be a route of, if you want to make more money and advance your career, you have to go into management, which is a completely different skill set. And for some people, that might be attractive, but it's no longer doing that job of helping the customer, which might have been
Yeah.
extremely fulfilling for you. You might have loved to teach other people how to do that well. Like you said, I think you said it was more German kind of through line, or structure, where they
Mm,
have
mm,
like an expert level, a Meister level, where you can go to, where you can foster that and not have to play the politics and the management and the optimizing of resources, because that's a different skill set. That's something that's
absolutely.
really we should be thinking about. Like, is inherently the system, the structure that we're building, self-defeating to the company and to the employees? That's a whole other podcast.
It is. I think there's a whole series of podcasts kind of spun
Yeah.
off the back of this. But going back to I think there's a lot of things you can do to make it. Well, I mean, not bomb proof completely,
Yes.
but if you can make your brand almost like a sub brand,
Hmm.
it's not just your current employer. You're super attractive to anyone who's in the kind of
If
same
you do get
industry.
cut,
Will be
it's true.
absolutely drawn to you.
Great
Um,
point,
uh,
Don.
yeah, and so you're building your profile and your brand not just within the company but outside it as well.
Yeah, it's that it's portable for you, and it's for you.
Mm,
They get the benefit of it, the current company you're working for, the larger brand, but also it goes with you. It helps
yeah,
when someone the first thing that they do when a resume comes across a desk at any technology company is they look up your LinkedIn profile and then they see what the Google result is.
yeah,
Like, and if your podcast pops up or other things that you've guested on or done, all of a sudden your negotiation level for salary and things like that go up because they're like, oh, this Don's a thing. Like,
yeah.
we need to treat it appropriately. Oh, how great that he's applying. Let's put him to the front of the queue. Like, this is the way humans are emotional. And when they see that kind of stuff, those are the kind of decisions that they make. So it really can help you either way to help insulate you right now or to be portable with you as you grow your career if you're graduated to go
Yes,
somewhere
yeah,
else.
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
and if you
love
have,
that.
I mean, I've been riffed or made redundant. I'll be open about this because I did actually do. I'm not very good at writing personal stories because I get quite emotional about it. But I did do
Yeah.
one because I think was it last autumn there was a lot of people losing their jobs, and I just wanted to say there was one thing I wanted to really say about it, which was, I've been made redundant 3 times in
Yeah.
my tech career, and I think, do you know what? I actually think it's just an occupational hazard if you're in the tech industry. And I know no matter how many times someone says, "Oh, it's not about you; it's about the thing."
Mhm.
Every time I still took it personally, but each time I kind of developed some new ideas to try and protect myself or see it coming, and then eventually I actually embraced it because my thinking had moved to where I am now, which is
Mhm.
it's about it doesn't really matter who I'm working for; it's about me creating a brand. Now, there's some. I have to be honest. Some of this is going to take a long while. So I've got a
Yeah.
fairly large kind of LinkedIn network. Because this isn't like Twitter numbers or TikTok numbers where people got millions or whatever. This actually takes a lot longer and it's a lot
Yeah.
harder to build a bigger network. It's easier to build followers than it is actual real connections. But I always value connections over followers anyway because we can talk to each other and it's a two-way relationship. But I have resolutely, probably for the last 7 years, I have every day I try and invite 10 people I think would want to connect with me.
Oh,
That's
that's
that's how
great.
I do it. That's how you build a bigger network. And because the other thing is, the more people you're connected to, the more people are second connections. Right. So nowadays, I don't invite anyone. I've never really find many people in my profession who are third connections. Almost,
Mhm.
99% of time, if I want to connect with somebody, or I think we should, remember the video, why we should be talking in 21 seconds. If there's someone I think we should be talking, we must have so much in common. Almost always these days, there are what's called a second connection. So for them, we have connections in common. But that does take a long while to do. It's just basically start your journey now if you've never done that. Get yourself
Just
well over
start.
500 and just keep going. But create content. It's great consuming content. It's safe to start as a curator of content, but the real game is creating the content.
And if
And one of my
anyone
top tips, yeah. Oh, sorry.
go for it. Go for it. No, no,
I was
please,
going
please
one
go
little
on.
top tip. One top tip is if you've not used Canva, oh my goodness me, use Canva. Jump in Canva, have a little play with it, and see the things
I'm a
it can
big
do.
fan as well. Our team uses Canva a
Yeah,
lot. Yeah.
yeah. So
It makes it
it's got
so
what they
easy. They
call
have all
smart
kinds of
mockups.
templates to use. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a thing called smart mockups, which will do absolutely amazing things with no graphic design experience whatsoever. And I'm very open about it. I even did an article about how I created a thing to do with smartwatches. I even told you how it was done, because I just think it's
See,
wonderful.
look at all this stuff. You need to check out Don's profile if you're just hearing Don for the first time. Seriously, it'll be in the show notes, but so
Thank
it's
you.
clickable. But really, just check out some of the content and the way that he does it. And here's the thing that I would say as well is, and it's kind of to Don's point that he was just talking about. Just get started. And when we are working with people as well, when if we always have someone in the room, we're used to working with very technical, buyer enablement engineers a lot of times when in our workshops, and there's always someone that's a little bit knotted up still, that they're like, I'm very technical, I'm not creative. And here's the thing that really can help unjam you is, and this is an acting tenet actually. So there was an old story about the Meisner technique. We don't have to go into it, but it's basically the whole method thing. Okay, or it is the method. It's not Meisner. It's the method. So and a new actor was asking a question of an acting master, like, what do I do to be on stage to be interesting? And when you're creating content, it can feel that way as well. It's like, well, how do I be interesting? There's so many voices out there, so many other people to look at. How do I be interesting? And the key is just to change it a little bit. It's what can I be interested in? Because people love watching and listening to people that are passionate about something they're interested in. It can be so small. It can be your hot take on how you think that there's ageism going on right now in something. It can be your hot take on, like, hey, there's this cool thing that I just learned about where you can show your smartwatch when you're demoing for prospects. I think it's really cool and I wanted to tell you about it. But it doesn't need to be big. Something that you're genuinely interested in, just talk about it. There's something, hopefully, in your job and in your industry that you find interesting. Talk about it. People are attracted to that. So that would be my piece of advice if you're just starting and you're giving yourself the excuse of, oh, I don't know how to be interesting, or I don't know what to do. What are you interested in? Start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think on video, and social, it actually doesn't reward you for doing, long form things. I know a couple of people who go, well, I've got this kind of like 5-page article I need to write.
Mm.
And I was like, well, I wouldn't bother doing that. And you split it down into kind of like 5 or 6 chunks or something like that. And that'll work better for you. We've all got really low attention spans.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And an idea or a little short video, for some people, is about all they've got time for. But if it makes them think, which goes to what Aaron says, if it makes you think, and especially if it encourages you to want to comment back on it or say, well, that's interesting, but my perspective is slightly different, is this. That's it. That's it. That is exactly how it all works. Get a conversation going. And another top tip as well is make sure that you reply to. I follow quite a few LinkedIn gurus, and one of the things they say about getting a post not quite viral, because I might never quite do that, but getting big viewing numbers and big engagement numbers is make sure that as soon as you post it, you're still online and can comment back to what anyone says. So a comment is worth much more than a like or any kind of reaction engagement, and of course that's worth much more than a view, which means nothing really.
Yes,
Yeah.
the algorithm likes that a lot. Our robot
Mm.
overlords love it when you actually interact with people that comment on the post that you just did. So that's no small thing. Yeah, so it's well worth your time. Well worth your time. Well, Don, thank you so much. I feel like we could talk for hours and go so many different directions. I definitely would like to do that in the future. But I feel like we've given people a lot to think about today as far as what's happening right now, specifically if you're being graduated or there's a reduction in force, kind of about pre-sales in general and how to build up that smaller sub brand that you can build for yourself that's portable. It's like a briefcase you bring with you wherever you are, so that your footprint as a buyer advocate or as someone that's just trusted in your industry, it really outlines your expertise. It'll be great for the job you have right now. And if you want to go elsewhere, it also really gives you more leverage if you want to negotiate your salary currently or somewhere else. So there's really no downside. The only thing you need to get over is telling yourself that it'll be hard to get started or you're going to do it in the future. Just start. Make yourself a commitment that in the next 2 weeks, you're going to turn on your smartphone. You're going to find an article that has something to do with your industry and that piqued your interest, and you're going to do a 1-minute hot take on it. And then ask for people what their opinion is and post it. Just do that. Just start there and see what happens. And I think they might be surprised at how effective that can be. Yeah. Now, Don, if people want to get a hold of you and want to use your expertise to help them or help their company, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Well, it's so relevant what we've just been talking about, because I kind of rebranded myself in the last year. So my company's called Winning Skills, but I was like, well, no one's ever heard of that, and I don't spend almost zero time promoting it. It's all tends to be me. I'm the kind of brand. So what I did is I rebranded everything. So I'm doncarmichael.com if you want to do
That's
that.
easy.
Or just check me out on LinkedIn. Easy to find, Don Carmichael there, and start a conversation from there. If you want to start it on LinkedIn, great. If you go to the website, there's multiple ways of as kind of interacting with each other. And it's
It's
just
perfect.
start talking. That's it,
Just make it
really.
easy. It's super
Yeah.
easy. It's his name.com. Come on, people. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you so much
Yeah.
for your time today, Don. And thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and expertise with people, especially right now that might be kind of
Yeah.
concerned with where their place is, if they're in buyer enablement or in sales, and how they could either stay where they are and make themselves more valuable, or if
Yeah.
they're one of these people that were affected and, need to know what they might be doing right
Yep.
now in order to make
Mhm.
themselves more valuable for their next gig. So thanks for that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Aaron.